Did you know there was a tribe in ancient times that was said to be cursed by God? A tribe whose fate was so terrible that they were almost completely wiped out. Today's video is about the tale of the Midianite curse, how it supposedly happened, and how the Midianites were ultimately destroyed by the Israelites. Stay tuned to uncover the shocking details of this biblical story, and what it might mean for us today. But first, if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, so you never miss out on our fascinating journeys through history. Let's set the scene. We're talking about the Midianites, an ancient people who lived in the Middle East, in areas that are now part of Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the Sinai Peninsula. Their story is a complex tapestry of cultural interaction, religious conflict, and alleged divine judgment. To truly understand the tale of the Midianite curse, we need to journey back to the times of the Old Testament, when the Israelites were just beginning to form as a nation. It's a story that spans generations and involves some of the most famous figures in biblical history. The Midianites were actually distant relatives of the Israelites. Both groups trace their ancestry back to Abraham, the patriarch of monotheism. The Midianites were descendants of Midian, a son of Abraham by his second wife, Keturah. The Israelites, on the other hand, trace their lineage through Abraham's son Isaac and grandson Jacob. At first, the relationship between these two peoples wasn't all bad. In fact, there are several positive interactions recorded in the early biblical narrative. One of the most notable is the story of Moses, the great leader of the Israelites. After fleeing Egypt, Moses found refuge in Midian. He even married a Midianite woman named Zipporah and worked for her father, Jethro, who was a Midianite priest. This early relationship shows us that the Midianites and Israelites were not always at odds. They shared common ancestors and, at times, lived alongside each other peacefully. But as we'll see, this harmonious relationship didn't last forever. The story takes a dark turn in the book of Numbers. According to the biblical account, some Midianite women, along with women from another group called the Moabites, began to lead Israelite men away from their faith. They invited these men to worship their gods and take part in their religious festivals. Now, this might not sound like a big deal to us today. After all, in our modern, multicultural societies, we're used to people following different religious practices. But in the ancient world, religion was often tied closely to national identity. For the Israelites, worshiping other gods wasn't just a personal choice. It was seen as a betrayal of their covenant with God and a threat to their very existence as a people. The Bible says this made God very angry. A plague broke out among the Israelites, killing many people. This is where the idea of the Midianite curse starts to take shape. In the biblical narrative, God sees the Midianites as the source of corruption and decides to punish them. God commands the Israelites to attack the Midianites as punishment for leading them astray. What follows is a brutal war, described in vivid detail in the book of Numbers. The Israelites defeat the Midianites completely, killing all the men, including their 5 kings. They take the women and children captive and seize all their livestock and wealth. But the story doesn't end there. When the Israelite soldiers return from battle, Moses is angry that they have spared the women, since they were the ones who had led the Israelites to sin in the first place. He orders that all the male children and all the women who aren't virgins should be killed too. Only the young girls are allowed to live and are distributed among the Israelites. I know what you're thinking. This is a pretty shocking and violent story. And you're right. It's important to remember that we're dealing with texts from a very different time and culture. The idea of completely wiping out another group of people is horrifying to us today. But it was more common in ancient warfare. This doesn't make it any less troubling, but it helps us understand the context. So, was this really a curse? That's a complex question. The Bible presents the destruction of the Midianites as coming directly from God's command, which some see as a form of curse. The completeness of their defeat could be interpreted as evidence of divine intervention. After all, the Israelites had just spent 40 years wandering in the desert, not exactly ideal military training. On the other hand, the word curse isn't actually used in the biblical account. It's described more as a punishment or judgment. The The Midianites' defeat could be explained by natural factors like the Israelites' superior numbers or military strategy. Some scholars even question the historical accuracy of this account, suggesting it might be more of a moral story than a literal history. It's also worth noting that the Midianites aren't completely wiped out in the biblical narrative. They show up again later in the Bible, particularly in the story of Gideon. This could suggest that either the initial destruction wasn't as complete as described, or that the term Midianite was used more broadly to describe various nomadic groups in the region. Whether or not we believe in a literal Midianite curse, this story raises some fascinating questions and themes that are still relevant today. It touches on the power of influence, the consequences of our actions, the complexity of cultural mixing, the danger of extreme thinking, the importance of loyalty, the changing role of women in society, and the challenge of breaking cycles of violence. In our modern world, we might think about these themes in terms of social media influencers or political leaders, whose words and actions can have far-reaching consequences. We see how the actions of a few can sometimes lead to consequences for many, whether it's in politics, business, or international relations. The story also reminds us of the complexities of cultural mixing. In our increasingly globalized world, we're constantly navigating these complexities. How do we maintain our own cultural identity while respecting and integrating with others? The harsh measures taken against the Midianites might make us uncomfortable, serving as a reminder to be cautious about any ideology that calls for the complete destruction of those who are different. It's fascinating to consider how our understanding of gender roles has evolved over time, from being seen as dangerous temptresses in this ancient story to becoming world leaders and change makers. The perception and reality of women's roles have undergone a massive transformation. In many parts of the world today, we're still grappling with how to break long-standing cycles of conflict and retaliation. What can we learn from history about how to move towards peace and reconciliation? While the idea of a Midianite curse might seem far removed from our modern lives, the themes in this ancient story are still incredibly relevant. It touches on issues of faith, cultural conflict, moral responsibility, and the sometimes harsh realities of human history. Today, we generally don't believe in curses or divine punishment in the same way. Most modern societies reject the idea of punishing an entire group for the actions of some of its members, but we still grapple with questions of how different religious and cultural groups can coexist peacefully, how to handle those who break society's rules, and what to do when our beliefs or ways of life are threatened. Many communities and nations are working hard to foster understanding between different groups. Interfaith dialogues, cultural exchange programs, and educational initiatives all aim to build bridges and prevent the kind of conflict we see in the Midianite story. On a global scale, we've developed institutions like the United Nations and international courts to help resolve conflicts between nations and protect human rights. While these aren't perfect, they represent our collective effort to find alternatives to the kind of total warfare described in the biblical account. The story of the Midianite curse also reminds us of the power of stories themselves. Whether or not we believe it happened exactly as described, this tale has been passed down for thousands of years. It has shaped how many people understand history, morality, and the nature of divine judgment. Even today, ancient stories like this continue to be read, studied, and debated, shaping the beliefs and values of millions of people around the world. As we reflect on this story, we might ask ourselves some important questions. How do we handle conflicts between different groups today? How do we balance justice with mercy? How do our actions affect not just ourselves, but entire communities? And how can we learn from the harsh lessons of history to create a more peaceful and understanding world? The story of the Midianite curse, with all its drama and controversy, serves as a powerful reminder of how stories from the distant past can still challenge us to think deeply about our values, our relationships with others, and our place in the world. Whether we see it as a literal curse or a metaphorical cautionary tale, it continues to spark important conversations thousands of years after it was first told. In our complex, interconnected world, perhaps the most valuable lesson we can take from this ancient tale is the importance of understanding and empathy. By striving to see things from other perspectives and treating each other with compassion, we might just be able to avoid the kind of conflict that led to the supposed Midianite curse. What do you think about the Midianite curse? How do you think we can apply lessons from this ancient story to our modern world? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into biblical history, give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Thanks for joining us on this journey through time. Don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating stories from history. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep an open mind.